The ballroom was the kind of place that made ordinary people feel small. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across marble floors. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Women in gowns that cost more than Russell's monthly rent swept past him without a glance. He pushed his mop cart along the edges of the room, invisible in the way that service workers learn to become, present but unseen, necessary but unacknowledged. Russell Haynes had made peace with invisibility a long time ago. After losing his wife to cancer 4 years earlier, after surrendering his career as a licensed child therapist to raise his 7-year-old son alone, after taking the only job that offered the flexible hours a single father desperately needed, he had learned that pride was a luxury he could not afford. What he could afford was presence. Full, quiet, unhurried presence, and that gift, it turned out, was worth more than anyone in that glittering ballroom understood. He noticed the girl before anyone else did, because he was the only one looking. She stood near the tall windows at the far end of the hall, half hidden by a curtain of heavy velvet drapes, her small fingers fluttering near her face in rapid, rhythmic patterns. She was perhaps 10 years old, wearing a dress that probably cost a fortune, pale blue silk, white ribbon at the waist, and she was completely heartbreakingly alone. Around her, executives laughed and clinked glasses and congratulated one, another on quarterly earnings. Not one of them looked her way. Russell recognized the signs immediately. The way a person never forgets a language they once spoke fluently. The hand movements were self-soothing, what therapists call stimming. The rigid posture, the eyes that swept the room without landing, the slight rocking motion she had begun. This child was overstimulated, overwhelmed and terrified, and nobody cared. He left his cart where it stood, smoothed the front of his maintenance uniform out of habit, and walked slowly toward her, not directly, not with the urgent stride that would startle her, but at an angle, the way you approach a bird that hasn't decided yet whether to fly. He stopped a few feet away and looked out the window beside her, following her gaze into the dark garden outside. "The lights out there are nicer than the ones in here," he said quietly to no one in particular. "Less loud." There was a long silence, then barely above a whisper, "Lights aren't loud." "No," he agreed easily. "But sometimes bright feels the same as loud, like too much of something all at once." Another silence. He did not push. He did not kneel down to her level in the performative way adults sometimes do, broadcasting discomfort disguised as warmth. He simply stood beside her and waited, the way he had learned to wait with his son on hard evenings, when words were too heavy to carry. "I don't like it here," she said finally. "That's fair," he replied. "There's a lot happening. My name is Heather." "I'm Russell." "I'm glad to meet you, Heather." She looked at him then, a quick evaluating glance, the kind that sees more than most people realize. "You're the janitor." "One of them, yes." "Why are you talking to me?" "Nobody talks to me at these things." The honesty of it hit him somewhere deep. He kept his voice steady. "Because you looked like you could use someone to stand next to." Her fingers slowed their fluttering. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, her shoulders dropped away from her ears. They stood together in companionable quiet for several minutes, watching the garden, while the party roared behind them. Then the orchestra shifted into something slower, a waltz, old-fashioned and swaying. Heather turned and looked at the dance floor. She watched the couples moving, something working behind her eyes, some calculation or longing he couldn't quite name. Then she turned and looked directly at Russell, really looked. The kind of eye contact that doesn't come easily and means everything when it does. "Dance with me," she said. The room did not literally go silent, but something shifted, a ripple of awareness, the way a stone changes water. Russell noticed a few nearby guests turn. He noticed across the ballroom a tall man in an expensive suit go very still. He would learn later that was Martin Gale, CEO of Gale Industries, Heather's father, a man who had spent a decade building an empire and had not yet learned how to build a moment with his own daughter. Russell held out his hand. "I should warn you," he said, "I'm not a very good dancer." Heather took his hand with complete seriousness. "That's okay. I'm not either." They danced. It was not elegant. Russell was a janitor who had not danced in years, and Heather was a 10-year-old, navigating a sensory world that was often too sharp and too bright. But they found a rhythm together, patient, unhurried. Two people who had both learned to exist in spaces that weren't quite made for them. Martin Gale set down his champagne glass and did not pick it up again. He watched his daughter's face, open, calm, genuinely present in a way he realized with a slow, quiet devastation that he had rarely seen. Because he had been too busy. Because he had hired specialists and scheduled therapists and ensured every material need was met, and had somehow missed the one thing she actually needed, which was the simplest thing in the world. Someone to stand next to her and wait. He crossed the ballroom before the song ended. He touched Russell's shoulder gently, and Russell stepped back. And Martin Gale, for the first time in longer than he could remember, danced with his daughter. Within a month, Gale Industries had launched a workplace inclusion initiative, not announced with fanfare, but built quietly from the ground up, beginning with a conversation between a CEO and a janitor over 2 cups of coffee in the break room. Russell was asked to consult given his background, and eventually offered a formal role developing the program. He accepted, but asked only for one thing in return, that it be built around the principle that had guided him through every hard year since his wife died. Not perfection, presence, the most expensive thing in that ballroom that night had turned out to be free. If this story moved you, you know someone who needs to hear it. Please share it with them. And if you believe that ordinary people do extraordinary things every single day, subscribe to Kindness True Stories, where we find the moments that remind us who we really are. Hit like, share this with someone who needs it today. And subscribe to Kindness True Stories, because the world needs more of this.